Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on the new Disney live-action Mulan. Let me say off the bat that I'm not a huge fan of Disney live-action remakes, but I am a huge fan of fantasy action Asian movies. My love for those kind of movies began when I first saw Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and I still love watching those kinds of movies like The Monkey King. I have no problem going into a fantasy world where all sorts of fantastical things are possible. I don't have a problem with magical way of fighting or shape-shifting or anything of that sort. In fact, I quite enjoy it. So when I first heard about the Mulan remake, I wasn't as pessimistic as I usually am about Disney remakes, and to be honest, I was actually kind of intrigued. Then we started to hear things like this coming down the pipeline. In the new Mulan, there is no Li Shang. According to an interview with producer Jason Reed in Collider, this was a deliberate choice inspired by recent events, and specifically the #MeToo movement, as he put it. I think, particularly in the time of the #MeToo movement, having a commanding officer that is also the sexual love interest was very uncomfortable, and we didn't think it was appropriate. I started to get less excited because I realized, like with everything else coming out of Disney today, gender politics, identity politics, and wokeness would play a prominent part. But I didn't realize how prominent because I just figured they were going to remove Li Shang from a commanding role, not basically get rid of his character altogether and essentially turn his replacement into a simp. Li Shang was one of my favorite characters in the animated Mulan, so watching his character be so belittled was hard to watch. Of course, this wasn't the only change to the movie Disney went with. The absence of Mushu was completely felt. He was replaced by a CG nameless phoenix who happened to show up once in a while to indirectly help Mulan out. But it was really lame, and you could never really get attached to the character of that phoenix the way you did with Mushu. I figured they probably had a problem with Mushu as well because he was voiced by a male actor, Eddie Murphy, and they didn't want her to be influenced or helped by a male ancestor. Couldn't they just gender swap Mushu? Because this change didn't make any sense as far as magical elements went in the movie. The movie is filled with magic, such as the shape-shifting character of the witch, which was actually a really cool character, but they also did a disservice to her character by the way they killed her off near the end of the movie. She gets killed by a single arrow shot at Mulan, and she sacrifices herself to save her, even though we had previously seen Mulan dodge arrows on horseback, Matrix style. So one single arrow couldn't have possibly harmed Mulan, and the sacrifice was completely unnecessary. I would have rather had them at least make two women join forces in the end to meet the baddie rather than what we got. But no, this was Mulan's time to shine, and she was the bestest ever! From the very beginning. And I really mean that. The movie started out by showing us that Mulan was a powerful little girl who, without any training whatsoever, could masterfully wield a staff, climb buildings, and save herself from nasty falls acrobatically, all without training, using what the movie called Qi, which was kind of like the Force. Mulan was told by her father to cut herself off from her Qi because Qi was meant for warriors, and she had to be a woman. But even after she cut herself off from her Qi, she couldn't help but display how amazing she was, like the scene where she caught all the teacups mid-air at her matchmaking event. When it's time for Mulan to set off to go to war instead of her father, the movie does little to show her getting ready to go. This scene was a very powerful one in the cartoon, starting with the fact that Mulan cuts off her hair, a symbol that she's cutting off her connection to her femininity. She doesn't do this in the movie, and I thought it was a huge missed opportunity. This movie went out of its way to show that Mulan was basically superhuman. Even the first time she picks up her father's sword, she already seems to know how to use it without any training. The thing I loved about the animated Mulan was that she was a human woman. She didn't have special powers. She went to training, trained, and was never fully the strongest person in the squadron either. She used her brain more than her strength to keep up with the men in the regiment, as shown when she climbed the pole. But Mulan in the movie was super strong from day one, and kind of salty. When she first met the character of Hong Hui, which was Li Shang's replacement, She accidentally bumped into him and fell down. He offered to help her up and she snapped at him and pulled a sword on him. During the movie, she ends up single-handedly saving him from the avalanche, which again, I had no problem with in terms of how it was done. I don't have a problem with the magical way these things are done in these kinds of movies. But she, like the rest of the squadron, had not finished her training and somehow could lift him out of the avalanche on horseback by herself. Again, showing that she's somehow kind of like superhuman. The other male characters are also diminished with the exception of Cricket. Yes, you heard that right. They replaced the animated Cricket with this guy, who ends up somehow learning to shoot double arrows from his back by the end of the movie, not having finished his training just like the rest of the regiment. Okay then. Her friendship with the squad is not nearly as great as depicted in the animated version. They all kind of just revere her strength after seeing her beat Huang Hui during a training exercise in another crazy Mary Sue moment where she taps into her chi and basically does things no one has ever done before. And of course, she climbs the summit before any of the men, while the rest of the men are barely able to make it up the mountain, including Huang Hui, which is just left there standing looking up at her in a really weird and awkward scene. Every single moment in this movie is designed to make Mulan look extremely amazing, like she's the bestest ever. Except for the fact that she got lost on her way to the squadron when she first set off from her house and ends up having to be shown the way by the Phoenix where to go. What are they trying to say? That women are bad at directions? You barely ever see any vulnerability within her, even after the witch confronts her for the first time and she's beaten by the witch. You see a weird scene of the Phoenix and you're like, what? Did the Phoenix do something to save her? And then you realize, oh no, it was her father's armor that saved her. But then she begins to get up and ride back to the battlefield and discards her father's heirloom armor that he just saved her, dropping it all over the place so disrespectfully. And then she lets her hair down in a scene that resembles a Pantene commercial, which is just it was so bad. So she heads back to the battlefield not wearing any armor and kicks more ass by herself, and then she ends up running the army off because they're also scared of her, that they think she's a witch, which she might as well be at this point. Later in the movie, she also loses her father's sword in the final battle and defeats the baddie in the most insanely corny way possible. But again, I didn't have a problem with the fantastical way she beat him, as cheesy as it was. I had a problem with the progression of all of it and how she was basically unbeatable. There was no sense of her being in any real danger whatsoever. After she frees the emperor, he throws her a giant party in her honor and asks her to join his personal guard. She refuses and tells him she's gonna have to go back and make things right with her family, and the emperor is like, oh yeah, you're so honorable and virtuous. So she goes back, but before she does, she meets Huang Hui one last time and barely gives him her hand, even though by then it's pretty clear he's totally into her and she's kind of has a thing for him too. Again, just totally brushing him off and making him a total simp. So she goes back to her family, and within 5 minutes of her arrival, of course, all is forgiven. And then the royal army shows up and gives her a new sword with a new virtue scribed on the sword dedicated to Mulan, calling it Devotion to Family. And she's told that she's asked again to go and join the emperor's personal guard, and she smiles like, oh my god, okay. She's been home all of 5 minutes and is basically thinking of setting off again. You never see Huang Hui again like you do with Li Shang in the animated movie, where he comes to her home and basically asks for her hand. Getting married and being part of a family unit are the furthest thing from Mulan's mind because she's an independent woman and needs no man. All in all, this movie was just really bad in general. I mean, as far as Mulan remake went, it was atrocious. And I've read a lot of people on Twitter say that It wasn't really meant for the American audience, but I can tell you this, I'm sure that the Asian audience has a higher standard when it comes to their fantasy action movies as well, and this sets the bar pretty damn low. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the Disney Mulan remake. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you so much. Till next time. Bye!